Daniel Arap Moi, naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya na kuitumikia kwa moyo wangu wote, na kwamba nitahifadhi, nitalinda na kuitetea katiba ya Kenya kwa mujibu wa sheria.
One sunny day in September 1924, it was just before sunset, and the cows were being herded home in a remote village, Kuriengo in Baringo, the home of the Tugena sub-tribe of the Kalenjin. The women were preparing to milk the cows, but one woman was unable to perform that task. Kaban had just given birth to a bouncing baby boy. She named him Toroitich. Young Toroitich grew up herding livestock among his peers, as was customary of the Tugen. He attended a mission school and was later to be baptized Daniel. 31 years later, in 1955, Toroitich, then a school teacher, made his debut in politics. He was elected to replace one John Tameno from Kajiado, who had resigned as Rift Valley's representative in the European-dominated Legislative Council, LegCo. In the successive years of intense campaigns for Kenya's independence, Moi worked closely with other African representatives in the LegCo. In 1960, Moi, together with the late Ronald Ngala, founded the Kenya African Democratic Union KADU. The aim of the party was to defend the rights of the smaller ethnic groupings in the face of the Kikuyu and the Luo, who were the majority in KANU, led by the late Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. KANU won the independence elections in 1963, and Moi, a fierce legislator, is famously reported as saying that the opposition must be strong in order to keep the government on its toes. Well, the late President Kenyatta soon convinced Moi, who was chairman of KADU, to disband his party and join KANU, thus immobilizing the only opposition to KANU. As a reward, he appointed a Minister for Home Affairs in 1964. Moi was to work closely with President Kenyatta. And in 1967, just 4 years after independence, Kenyatta named Moi his number 2, a post he held until Kenyatta passed away in 1978.
I find painful to speak about Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, who has been my father, my teacher.
As vice president, Moi was perceived as unambitious and fiercely loyal to his boss. The power barons around the late president did not view him as a real threat to their hold on power at that time or in the near future.
Naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya na kuitumikia kwa moyo wangu wote.
When Moi took the oath of office in 1978, the then so-called Kiambu Mafia, who had been exercising the real power during Kenyatta's twilight years, dismissed Moi as a passing cloud. They did not believe that he would be president for much long.
Vice President Mr. Daniel Arap Moi is now President of Kenya for the next 90 days until an election is held for the future president of Kenya.
Fate had placed Vice President Moi in a strategic position. He assumed his role as president for 90 days, after which elections were to be held. He looked meek and worried, and certain of what the future held for him. He was aware of how badly the Kiambu Mafia wanted him out of the way.
Of our father, who passed away last night.
When Moi assumed the reins of power, Kenya was a vibrant economy, raring to go. And the president was determined to make it even more vibrant. A development conscious leader, you could say. Coming from an arid region, environmental conservation was close to his heart. He traversed the country, personally taking charge of soil conservation programs. Remember the Gabions? He rolled up his sleeves and got down to work. What better way to lead than by example?
Mwai. Na Mungu alipoumba ulimwengu siku ya 7 ikasema kila kitu ni mzuri. Hiyo ni kweli hapana? Aliweka miti ya kusitiri au kuweka maji, miti ya kutumia kwa kuni, miti ya aina yote, miti ya kuwezesha nyuki kupata asali au kunyonya maua atengeneze asali.
He was certainly at peace with the greenery. The tree nurseries were nurtured with tender care, and there were probably enough trees to his name to make Professor Wangari Maathai very envious. If you cut down one tree, plant 2 was the policy. And just like today, healthcare was a big challenge to the budding nation. Hospitals were few and far between. Harambee was the answer. Resources were quickly put together, and Nyayo wards sprang up across the country. You know who laid the foundation stones. And never mind that the Nyayo wards are now a reminder of a brilliant development agenda gone awry. Public hospitals are a national shame, dirty, crowded, and lacking in essential medicines. And of course, those with connections in the right places now own homes in what was once a coveted national resource, forests. The Nyayo T-zones and the Nyayo buses to improve access to urban transport. And oh yes, the Nyayo Pioneer car were all part of the grand plan. Then, one day in the wee hours of August 1, 1982, unknown to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, his junior officers attempted to topple him as their commander and president of the Republic. It was the darkest day in the history of the country. The nation survived military rule by a whisker. Kenyans were so terrified, but one Kenyan was more terrified than them all. That Kenyan was President Moi. Clearly shaken, the president sought to assure Kenyans that all was well after all. So, at 6 p.m. August 1, 1982, the president went on national television, the then Voice of Kenya.
Yale yaliyotokea leo asubuhi kwa muda mfupi iliyoletea wananchi wasiwasi mwingi.
Well, that was perhaps the only time you ever saw a nervous Moi. That Sunday, he emerged from the studios a totally different man. Priority number 1, never again. No one would ever again attempt to wrest power from him using unconstitutional means and perhaps not even constitutional. Political survival became his primary concern. The president then started dislodging remnants of the Kiambu mafia who had surrounded him. The following year, in 1983, then powerful Minister for Constitutional Affairs Charles Mugabe Njonjo was forced to resign on allegations of trying to topple Moi with the aid of unspecified foreign masters. Moi set up the Njonjo Commission of Inquiry, in which he was accused of being a traitor. President Moi promptly pardoned him, and a completely humiliated Njonjo retreated from public life. Then followed a crackdown on political dissidents and underground movements agitating for greater freedom. Many people were put behind bars. The so-called Mwai dissidents were detained, often without trial, on allegations of trying to undermine the legally established government of Kenya. The president then put machinery in place to ensure that the ruling party, KANU, became the supreme organ of the land. Some 9 years after the coup attempt, President Moi was to admit that August 1, 1982 was indeed a turning point in his checkered political career.
Mpaka mwaka wa 82 si tulikuwa na watu kitu kimoja. Mwaka wa 81, 79 wakati wa hayati mzee Jomo Kenyatta, japokuwa hatukuja kuandikisha kupiga marufuku, tulikuwa kitu kimoja.
That was the day Moi gave the green light for the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution, paving the way for the creation of President Moi of the 1990s. The 1992 election proved a formidable challenge to Moi's rule, but against all expectations, he weathered the storm.
I've restrained myself. They've abused even me. That's democracy. They've abused everybody. But there is a limit for everything. I've forgiven them for abusing me, but no further.
He emerged from the 1992 election more battle-hardened than ever before, and asked if he would consider co-opting the opposition into government, Moi was categorical.
Those who will secure 20 or 30 members, and others 10 or 5 will be in the opposition on the opposition bench to criticize the government. Now it is up to the government to see how the country runs.
Meanwhile, as Moi mastered the art of political survival and consolidation of political power, he had little time to ensure that his lieutenants deliver on his 1978 pledge to ensure sustainable development and prosperity of the Kenyan people. Corruption became a byword in the management of public affairs. It became widespread and deeply rooted. Kenyans do not consider what belongs to the government as their own to mind. So, a few fat cats have plundered every imaginable public resource, public land, forests, pocketed all the money meant for the development of infrastructure. And it became fashionable for civil servants to demand bribes to offer services for which they are paid a salary to deliver. This, coupled with the need for greater freedoms, led to the intense agitation which characterized the last 12 years of President Moi's rule. But even President Moi's most fierce critics cannot begrudge him of the important role he played in holding the country together in peace. Despite the eruption of ethnic clashes in the 1990s, Kenya has remained relatively calm compared to the rest of the neighboring states. Whoever said Moi was a passing cloud, that cloud certainly stayed on for 24 years. For End of an Era, Farida Karne reporting. To many of his critics, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the 42-year-old graduate of economics and political science, crash-landed on the political scene just over a year ago, plucked from relative political oblivion by his mentor, President Moi. Few saw it coming. However, according to informed sources within the corridors of power, Project Uhuru was indeed a project, a long-term undertaking dating back to 1993. Of course, at the time, Moi's retirement, or indeed Uhuru Kenyatta's role in it, was still hazy. But President Moi wanted Kenyatta's son on his side. After all, his father founded KANU and wooed him over from the then opposition Kenya African Democratic Union KADU. In the first multi-party election in 1992, Uhuru was then working closely with the leader of the unregistered Sabasaba Asili Party, Kenneth Matiba, and later with the Democratic Party's Mwai Kibaki. But Moi won the 1992 election against all odds.
Most of the Western world countries have been partisan. They've been supporting members of the opposition.
He won anyway, and he started making overtures to Uhuru to abandon his undercover activities within the opposition and work with him and for him in the ruling party. At that time, Moi desperately needed the populous Kikuyu on his side, and the Kenyatta name he hoped would work magic to restore the confidence of the community, which had little regard for him. It is rumored that Moi even promised to nominate Uhuru to parliament. But suspicious of President Moi's intentions, Uhuru declined the nomination offer. Come 1997, and Moi was back on Uhuru's case. This time, he wanted him to contest the Gatundu South parliamentary seats. Moi was, however, categorical that Uhuru had to run on a Kanu ticket. Uhuru is said to have told the president of the hostility towards Kanu in central Kenya. Give it a try, persisted the president. He did, and lost to Moses Muhia, then of the Social Democratic Party.
I would possibly agree that it is not my initiative, because as I've been a team player, and I have always been ready to work with anybody who has the interests both of our party and of the country at heart. And from that perspective, I think I was prepared to play, as I've said many, many times in the past, any role that I would be offered, either by my party or by Kenyans.
Even the decision to contest the highest job on the land was not entirely his own. But there had to be a way to push Kenyatta's son Uhuru to the political limelight. How about Thika Kanu branch chairman? Okay, not good enough though. Give him additional duties. Then, in 1998, Uhuru was chosen to head the Disaster Emergency Response Committee. The committee was charged with the responsibility of coordinating and raising funds for relief activities in northern Kenya. He probably was not sufficiently prominent in this position. And how about tourism? A complete disaster after the Likoni clashes in 1997. Trying to sort out the mess might give him the exposure. So, he was appointed chairman of the Kenya Tourism Board. The year is 1999. He did a fairly good job in restoring confidence in the industry, whose image had been badly dented by insecurity. Meanwhile, it's been more than a year since Moi named his cabinet after the 1997 general election, but he still has not named a vice president. Several names are touted as potential vice presidents: Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, and Katana Ngala. Mudavadi and Ngala even take turns in parliament, acting as leader of government business, a job normally done by the vice president. 14 months after naming his cabinet in January 1998, Moi reappointed Saitoti as vice president. In the meantime, the professor of politics has started giving indications that he will call it a day after his final constitutional 5-year term, which expires on January 4th, 2003. Few believe him, but he goes on the record anyway, not once, but countless times.
People overseas think that Moi would like to cling to power. Nataka kutangazia nyinyi kwamba wakati wa kustaafu kwangu umefika baada ya uchaguzi huu.
Then he introduces an interesting dimension. When I do retire, I will hand over power to the younger generation, he asserts. And you have the young Turks jostling to outdo each other, trying to expound on the president's statement.
It can only be fair if the 21st century is given to the .com generation.
Wananchi wetu wanaendelea kufilisika kwa sababu viongozi wenyewe waendelea kujitafutia yao. Na ikiwa wataendelea, tuwasema basi vijana wako tayari kuungana, kufanya kazi pamoja, ndio tuweze kusaidia wananchi wa taifa hili letu la Kenya.
We have no history of being losers. We shall deliver. Na tunaangalia yeye uso yake, tunaangalia macho yake vizuri sana. Tunataka atumie sign yoyote kuonyesha ni direction gani, and will be in full combat gear.
Elders katika bunge, kila mmoja wao akiwa mwanasiasa anasema mimi niko na vijana. They are proud of the youth. Mimi niko na vijana. I think it is time hata sisi kama vijana tuseme sisi tuko na wazee.
Of course, Professor gives no age limit to the young tax generation. He's mentioning no names either, and hope is kept alive since many of them believe they fit the young tax bill. So, all the president's men line up in his praise. Then one day, he returns from a foreign trip and looks deliberately at the battery of cabinet ministers who have trooped to the airport to meet him, and according to him, none among them is good enough to succeed him. They all laugh and clap hard. His then Vice President George Saitoti is among those present. As usual, everyone thinks that the president is cracking a practical joke. Well, maybe he was, but then again, he was serious. By his own admission, it had taken him 4 years of careful consideration of his cabinet to come to the conclusion that none among members of his cabinet were fit to succeed him. And so in October last year, President Moi decided on the need for a crash succession program, quickly nominating Uhuru Kenyatta to Parliament and appointing a minister soon after. The young Turks are meanwhile still singing his praises as they help him craft the merger between KANU and the defunct National Development Party, the NDP. In March this year, the merger deal is sealed and Uhuru Kenyatta, Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo Musyoka, Ketana Ngala, alongside NDP's Raila Odinga, are placed at the ruling party's top hierarchy. The deal achieves two purposes. It ages out Moi's long-term friends, Joseph John Kamotho, who was then Secretary General of KANU, and then Vice President George Saitoti. Secondly, the merger gives KANU a much-needed facelift. Besides, it boosts its parliamentary strength, with 21 MPs crossing over from the NDP. By now, many have a rough idea that the merger lineup has something to do with Moi's succession plan. But just a select few are privy to the details. Few know that Uhuru is in fact the first among equals, slated for greater things. Sources tell Nation TV that in fact before the merger deal, some of those within the party who harbored ambitions of succeeding Moi were summoned for a meeting with the president at his Kabarak home. Those present included Uhuru himself, Kalonzo Musyoka, Raila Odinga, Musalia Mudavadi, and William Ruto. They all commit themselves to supporting whoever Moi picks as the ruling party's presidential candidate. At that stage, it was easy to extract that commitment since Moi had not indicated that it was in fact Uhuru he had settled on. 5 months after the merger deal in March this year, Moi shows up at a public rally in far-flung Mount Elgon district to anoint Uhuru as his preferred heir. It's a day Moi will probably never forget. Although he was his usual self, confident and finding something to tickle him, it was the beginning of the worst rebellion ever Moi has ever had to endure in his party. For End of an Era, Farida Kaune reporting.
He has been in Parliament for most of his life. To be precise, Emilio Mwai Kibaki can boast of 40 straight years as an MP. It is now time to tell his story, an open-ended one for that matter, as he's yet to drop a full stop and close his political CV. Yes, it's a story of a man who swallowed the bait of politics at the age of 29 years and who now at the age of 71 is still chewing it. The reason? The presidency. Twice he has given it a shot, and twice he has missed the target. Just who is Mwai Kibaki? Is he a political coward or a fierce go-getter? Is he a dreamer of an elusive political fantasy or a visionary leader unfairly denied his kind of job? Will he come next year go down the annals of history as a symbol of a golden opportunity squandered or as a symbol of the president Kenya almost missed? There the story starts. Kibaki, the man and his style of politics. It is here in Othaya Division that Mwai Kibaki was born in 1931, innocently unaware of what he would be like 71 years later. Those who went to school with the young Kibaki use the word brilliant to describe him. Mzee Joseph Mwangi remembers one sad day for Kibaki at the Karima Mission Primary School. One day, he failed a mathematical sum.
Yeye alikuwa mwanafunzi asiye pana na wengine sababu alikuwa mwerevu zaidi. Hatuja mshida, siku moja alishindwa kwa hesabu akalia. Alipolia sisi akamwambia ameanguka, akalia tena. Kwa hivyo hakujua siku nyingine.
In 1960, local politicians led by the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga reportedly sent for Kibaki, then a lecturer at Makerere University. They wanted him to assist in the drafting of the KANU constitution. Thus, in Easter that year, Kibaki returned and became the first KANU National Executive Officer, a position he held until 1962.
And it showed my own commitment, because at that particular time, it was not relevant whether you are paid or not paid. We had to work very hard, because we believed, we were committed to the achievement of independence, which we did.
He was the MP for Bahati, later renamed Makadara, between 1963 to 1974. Then he shifted base to Othaya constituency in Nyeri district, where he has enjoyed an uninterrupted 28-year record. Less than a year into the vice presidency, Kibaki started what would later qualify as his darkest political phase. He came under serious political strain from the then Attorney General Charles Njonjo at the behest of President Moi. Never mind that Njonjo is the same person who in 1976 teamed up with Kibaki to oppose the Change the Constitution movement, a fierce campaign whose aim was to prevent President Moi from being the automatic successor to Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. The battle to discredit Kibaki worsened after 1980 when Njonjo quit his seat as the AG to join parliamentary politics, winning the Kikuyu seat. He was appointed Minister for Constitutional Affairs. Gigi Kariuki, another of Njonjo's comrades in the war against Kibaki, was elevated to the powerful post of Minister for Internal Security. As is characteristic of him, Kibaki chose not to hit back.
People who want aggression, they forget what I believe is fundamental. In life, between persons, the most important thing is not that you hit the other fellow and knock him down. It is rather that you come to understand each other, that you speak to him, you try and persuade him, because then he'll become your friend and you cooperate. So in my approach to any problem, I'm seeking always to a way that we can do it together, rather than some friends of mine who think that if you have a contrary opinion, their mission is to make sure they knock you down and you're out of their way. They think you're blocking. But I have always believed that we must seek reconciliation between human beings. That is a more lasting solution.
Those who have interacted with Kibaki politically or otherwise confirm the consistency in his gentleman-style politics. John Keane, with whom Kibaki in the early 60s popularized KANU, says aggressiveness has conspicuously been lacking in Kibaki's political career.
I've known Mwai for more than 40 years. During the struggle of independence in this country, Mwai was the executive officer of KANU, and I was the national organizing secretary of KANU. Mwai's political style is incompatible with the intrigues, manipulation, political manipulations, dishonesty of this country. Mwai is a thorough gentleman. He is his style of politics is more British.
Political intrigues within KANU targeting Kibaki increased in the run-up to the 1985 KANU elections. The vice president had no doubt been pushed to the wall. His decision to stay on in the party at that time will forever remain his most regrettable political decision.
In 1984, when I sensed what was going on, and we could see the changes that have begun to set in, that was the right moment we should have resigned.
After the KANU elections, the battle was taken to his Nyeri district backyard. Veteran politician Waruru Kanja was President Moi's pointman in Nyeri insofar as this battle was concerned. Since then, Kibaki and Waruru remain sworn political enemies.
We can always look back and see their political track record. Yeah? Because it's not fair to say because one is in this party, will be able to deliver when he comes to the government. What did he achieve when he was, say, for instance, in Kanu in the past?
Another humiliation was to come after the 1988 elections when Kibaki was dropped from the vice presidency. Many expected him to resign from the government. He did not. Instead, he spread the Kanu gospel the more. At one time, he likened the strength of Kanu with the proverbial mugumo tree, which he said could not be felled by a razor. It was only after the advent of multi-party politics that Kibaki quit Kanu to form the Democratic Party. The time to fight Kanu from outside had come. How has Kibaki succeeded in opposition politics? Will he be third time lucky? All this coming up in another edition of End of an Era.
In 1989, communism collapsed, and with it went 3 decades of a Cold War between the former Soviet Union and its allies, also known as the Eastern Bloc, and the United States and its allies, known as the West. And with that emerged a new world economic and social order. There was now only one superpower, the United States of America. Every country on the globe had to sing its song, and Kenya was not an exception.
In such a world, Cold War deterrence is no longer enough. To maintain peace, to protect our own citizens and our own allies and friends, we must seek security based on more than the grim premise that we can destroy those who seek to destroy us.
Dissent became open. Phrases which would previously have landed one in detention became an anthem. The wind of change had started to blow across Kenya.
They have accused me of masterminding disorders here. You name it, they've accused me of it.
Eventually, Moi gave in to pressure. In a historic Kanu National Delegates Conference of 1991, the ruling party was mandated to scrap Section 2A of the Constitution, which had made Kanu the only legal political party.
Kitu mimi nauliza nyinyi leo, ili tuone hawa walio katika siasa, wale walio watumishi wa serikali, sisi tuseme kwamba tufungue, tuondoe ile section ya katiba ya Kenya ya 2A.
Na kwa hivyo, kama ulivyotuambia mtukufu rais, mimi kwangu naunga mkono, kwa sababu hawa watu wanaitwa Ford na wengine wameendelea kudanganya wananchi ya kuwa kuna kitu wananyimwa.
The first real opposition party, Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, was riding high on the wave of change. Then, President Moi's once trusted friends started to desert him. They went one by one. But it was the resignation of Mwai Kibaki, the then Minister for Health, on Christmas Day 1991, which shook many.
I have resigned from the government, and that a detailed statement will be issued tomorrow.
He was later joined by powerful politicians, mainly from the central province, to found the Democratic Party. It was to become a formidable opposition to Kanu.
Now Ford!
But it was Ford which was the real challenge. It attracted hundreds of thousands of supporters, and for a while it looked set to wrest power from Moi. But that was long before the disintegration. Apart from the Democratic Party eating into the opposition vote, Ford, the once indomitable party that shook the nation, split into two. Ford Kenya, led by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and Ford Asili, led by Kenneth Matiba. Moi took full advantage of the disunity in the opposition to beat them fair and square in 2 successive elections. The irony is that on both elections, the combined opposition votes far surpassed KANU's. Among the unflattering issues for which President Moi's regime will be remembered is corruption. Despite a declared war against the vice, there was massive plunder of state resources that disaffected both Kenyans and her donors. It is the vice that led to the chilly relationship between the government and the Bretton Woods institutions.
The IMF did not say, establish CASA. The IMF said, we agree to fight corruption. You agree with that? How are you going to fight it? The government said, okay, we will set up CASA. CASA was functioning. CASA was showing results. The court said CASA is unconstitutional. We have no quarrel with that. That's the business for the court. The question becomes, if it is not constitutional, how are you going to fight corruption?
But perhaps the worst scars left by the wind of change are those of tribal clashes. For the first time since independence, brother rose against brother, leaving a trail of bloodshed and destruction in the aftermath. In parts of Nyanza, the Rift Valley and Coast provinces, hundreds of people were killed and thousands others were displaced during the clashes. But it is the people with whom Moi worked, how he chose them, how he dumped them, and how he recycled them that baffled his subjects. Charles Jonjo is a case study. In his day, he wielded absolute power. Yet, at that time, he was a civil servant. Once in a while, he hiked a lift in the presidential limousine. When his time came, he fell with a thud and left the scene in disgrace. About 10 years later, Moi needed him. He was rehabilitated and is now an ardent supporter of Moi's. And it was not only Jonjo. Many others found themselves in the same cycle. Joseph Kamotho and George Saitoti are just but the latest casualties. That was Moi's style of playing game, and he won it. As he leaves the field, it may be right to say that Moi did not lose to the politicians after all, but rather it was communism that died, and with it came a new world order. Moi fell to the new world economic and social order.
An open government whose leadership is responsive to the wishes of its people and which is accountable to the electorate, whose will is expressed in free and fair elections held at regular intervals in which all adult Kenyans are eligible to vote. That is the government that the Democratic Party promises to establish in Kenya.
And with that statement, Mwai Kibaki was a transformed politician. The suppressed ambitions came to bear. In DP, Kibaki found for himself a microphone through which to hit at the same man under whom he had served as the country's vice president for 10 years. The DP euphoria spread like a bushfire across central Kenya, but it was later to be challenged by a similar euphoria that competed for attention in the same region, the Ford Asili euphoria, or simply Kenneth Matiba. This way, the former vice president managed exclusive political authority only in Nyeri, his home district. In the 1992 elections, Kibaki came a disappointing third. Matiba was later to bow out after giving President Moi a run for his money in the 1992 elections, thus giving Kibaki more room to spread the DP tentacles and eat into the Gema vote bloc.
All these are the most...
And in 1994, Jaramogi died, triggering leadership wrangles in Ford, Kenya. The absence of Matiba and Jaramogi meant that Kibaki performed better in 1997, coming in second after President Moi.
Almost every single party has had no reservation whatsoever regarding the need for us to get rid of Moi.
He took up the seat as leader of the official opposition in Parliament in 1998. After losing for the second time, the opposition realized it was time to change its approach to politics. Together with Wamalwa Kijana of Ford Kenya and Charity Ngilu, then in the Social Democratic Party, Kibaki, as the opposition chief, embarked on a mission seeking a united front. A strong opposition would, among other things, counter KANU, especially for the fact that President Moi was around the same time wooing Raila Odinga from the opposition. Kibaki, Wamalwa and Ngilu founded the National Alliance for Change, eventually transforming the alliance into a party, the National Alliance Party of Kenya. The climax of this unity bid was the announcement of the NARC leadership lineup with Kibaki as the presidential nominee.
It is now my greatest pleasure to introduce to you the next President of the Republic of Kenya.
Tulipoanza ilikuwa tu kwamba sisi tuliamini lazima tupate njia ya kuunganisha Wanakenya ili tufaulu na tutimize yale tulitaka kutimiza 1992 na 1997 na hatukuweza kuyatimiza kwa sababu tulikuwa tumegawanyika.
A significant boost for Kibaki and NARC came when renegade top KANU officials and ministers quit the party and government to join the opposition through the Liberal Democratic Party. They were protesting at President Moi's open preference for Uhuru Kenyatta as his successor. Their driving force was to fight KANU from outside through supporting the idea of a single opposition presidential candidate.
It now gives me great pleasure to present to you our next President of Kenya, Honorable Mwai Kibaki.
I personally feel very challenged by the honor that has been bestowed on me by my colleagues, by the parties we have formed, but I even feel more challenged because I am fully aware of the job that is ahead of us. But I am encouraged by one thing. When I've looked around and talked to people with whom we have finally agreed on how to proceed, and with whom we have begun putting together the manifesto we shall present to Kenyans, I am convinced that we have a team which is going to be very, very strong, very powerful.
This unity of purpose brought forth the National Rainbow Coalition. Once again, the lucky card fell on Emilio Mwai Kibaki. That is the political path Mwai Kibaki, who's now 71, has walked in the opposition politics. From a clenched fist salute to a two-finger salute. One wonders, how will Kibaki treat those who cleared the path for him? How will he manage to hold together the fragile parties under NARC? What role is he likely to play to ensure NARC, if it forms the next government, survives the 2007 elections without him? All this in the next edition of The End of an Era.
The late President Kenyatta was a robust politician, a man who made his presence felt. The founding father of the nation also found time to be a father to his children. He had 2 sons with his third wife, Mama Ngina. They named their eldest son, now 42, Uhuru. Uhuru grew up amongst his siblings in their home in Gatundu. and was only 18 when his father died.
The one thing that always was a pillar of strength. He always felt that so long as he was there, nothing could ever go wrong, right? There was always somebody, or there was always a shoulder to lean on. It took time for us to actually realize that he wasn't there anymore.
24 years after the demise of that pillar of strength, Uhuru is trying to walk. No, actually, has been forced to try and walk the path his late father did. He's trying to succeed President Moi as the country's third president.
I would possibly agree that it is not my initiative, because as I said, I've always been a team player and I've always been ready to work with anybody who has the interests both of our party and of the country at heart. And from that perspective, I think I was prepared to play, as I've said many, many times in the past, any role that I would be offered, either by my party or by Kenyans.
And here, the story begins. Why did Moi settle on Uhuru? Why did he risk all the friendships he had built over the years? In the words of his critics, to force down the throats of his party supporters, or indeed the wider Kenyan public, a man they knew so little about.
Wangeniuliza kama wangekuwa waaminifu kwangu, Rais, umetaja kijana huyu ukitumia mambo gani kuwezesha arrive at that decision?
President Moi never quite answered that question. But according to those who have his ear, the reasons are as varied and as controversial as the Project Uhuru salesmen themselves. Apparently, Moi isn't quite proud of his track record. He would have loved to leave behind a vibrant Kenya, a land of opportunity, and he blames those he appointed to positions of responsibility for his failures.
Nimewasaidia kwa kila kitu hapa, mwishowe wanaondoka na kunilaumu. Kama mtu alikuwa na wizara, anaendesha wizara fulani, anasema Moi, mimi nilikuwa waziri pale.
But to many Kenyans, this excuse does not hold water. The buck stops at the presidency. Being Kenya's chief executive, the president could have fired such government officials and hired competent men and women. He didn't. Instead, political patronage replaced merit in the management of public affairs over the years. Now, Uhuru's salesmen argue that Moi wanted Kenya's third president to make a clean break, to start afresh, and he thought those who had worked under him knew no better way of managing public affairs other than patronage and personal entrenchment. He is reported to be painfully aware that his cronies have formed spiderweb cartels that an insider would find difficult to dismantle. According to this school of thought, Moi wanted a complete newcomer, someone who could introduce his own style of management and overhaul the system. And he had to look outside his government for this person. And that is how Uhuru Kenyatta landed the title of preferred successor.
I think there is one credit you must give to the president, that he can read the public mood and read it well. The president did read very well that Kenyans needed change. And I don't think they are going to settle for anything less than change. And Uhuru will give that change that Kenyans want and are looking for. He is a new person. We want to do the business of our country in a different way. The way we have done the business of our country
I think Kenyans want a change. We want new players. We want people who can do things in a different way, in a better way.
Even later-day converts to the Moi cause feel they have something to credit Moi with.
Uhuru is fresh. He has a global perspective, which is today's way of doing things.
And in the tribal calculations of Kenya's politics, Uhuru's surname was certainly an added advantage to his CV. Moi hoped that Kenyatta would have more national appeal.
Na naweza kubeba mzigo si kama mimi, ataweza kubeba kubwa kama mimi. Atabeba kadiri ile anaweza, na kwa usaidizi wetu ataweza kubeba.
And there is more. Project Uhuru salesmen say Kenya needed someone who could say no to his friends. And to qualify the argument, they say those who have worked with Moi could never have said no to him. They wouldn't even have the guts to criticize him. They claim that in fact, had it not been for Raila Odinga's prodding, many of those now heading the NAC presidential campaign would still be in Kanu, singing Moi's praises.
The ruling party must demonstrate flexibility in terms of democratic practice.
Apparently, Moi's cronies even had trouble with Uhuru when he hit the campaign trail, pointing out mistakes in the Moi administration.
We have indeed made mistakes. Yes, we have indeed there are some areas that we have definitely not gone the right path or not followed the right path. And I would like to see us be able to say, okay, let's now draw a line. This is where we start from. Let's learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past, and let's use that learning experience to be able to help us and to move us forward into the future.
It is said that so much was the pressure for Uhuru to drop the Moi bashing line in his campaigns that he had to seek the president's express authority in order to campaign along those lines. But whether in fact Uhuru can say no to his own friends is debatable. How, for instance, if elected president, is he going to brush off his chief campaigners, some of whom are said to have questionable track records?
Whatever positions that will be made available in my government will be based on ability and on merit, not on any other agenda. And that is a position that I hold and I am very clear about. And I think not only do we need, as I say, we need to, the essential aspect of better governance is the introduction of those ethos of integrity, hard work, commitment, and individuals who will bear and will carry those ethos forward will be the individuals that we shall work with. Individuals who do not have those ethos will have no part to play in any government of the future.
The perceived imposition by President Moi has been Uhuru's greatest challenge in his campaign. He is viewed through Moi's lenses, and critics are always on the lookout for a sinister motive in Moi's political moves.
Kibaki may emerge on the basis of consensus, but Uhuru is emerging in a background, an unfortunate background of a very acrimonious political process in which his friends and foes within KANU and outside KANU are saying he has been imposed. Now, that is a big liability for somebody who is coming into public life in a significant way for the first time and is running for the highest office in the land.
It did not help much when the president recently told Kenyans at a public rally that they will be voting for him if they voted for Uhuru. Uhuru's critics believe that Moi's choice of Uhuru had more to do with personal other than national considerations.
We are not here for ourselves alone. We are there as trustees of the future for Kenyans.
That this whole movement is intended to sideline Raila and to consign the Luo again to the periphery of politics in Kenya.
According to them, Moi is worried more about his security in retirement than restoring Kenya to its past glory of being the pride of Africa. They claim that President Moi is seeking protection from prosecution or otherwise for alleged economic crimes by his administration.
And I don't think that the issue of protection comes in any place. What we need to be able to focus on is where do we want to go? Why do we need to assume that the only way you can gain leadership position is if by cutting deals of protection? No. I think what Kanu wants is the leap into the future.
But whatever the reasons for Moi's choice of Uhuru, that's all now water under the bridge. Uhuru Kenyatta is leading Kanu's war against an immense opposition onslaught in the battle for State House. Will he weather the storm, or will he hand Kanu its first defeat in 39 years? For End of an Era, Farida Karone reporting.
It was a day before the much-anticipated KANU presidential nominations at Kasarani. Everyone was keenly watching to see if the breakaway group from KANU would field a candidate against Uhuru Kenyatta. Raila Odinga and his newfound allies chose KANU headquarters at KICC to make the stand known.
Itakuwa ni kitendo cha usalata mkubwa kwetu kama viongozi kuenda Kasarani kule tukiwa kama tunajua matokeo ya Kasarani tayari yanajulikana.
They would not, after all, go to endorse Uhuru's nomination. 2 days earlier, Raila led his cabinet colleagues in quitting government.
We, the three undersigned ministers and an assistant minister, do hereby tender our resignations from the government as ministers with immediate effect.
Kalonzo Musyoka was not there, but he eventually quit his comfortable cabinet posting and joined the rugged world of opposition ranks. His announcement came just hours before the Rainbow Alliance members made their way to Uhuru Park for what would turn out to be a turning point in Kenya's opposition politics. That was the mood as it emerged that Raila Odinga and company were joining the little-known Liberal Democratic Party. But that was not the end. The LDP was joining forces with the National Alliance Party of Kenya to form the National Rainbow Coalition, which now poses the strongest challenge to KANU's rule since independence.
Tutapeleka mswada kwa bunge ya kuangusha serikali na kufanya uchaguzi mara moja.
Analysts believe that Raila Odinga is the force behind this strong coalition. As campaigns gathered momentum, KANU's propaganda machine sent out word that he was set to take over from Kibaki after 6 months in power. His target was apparently Kijana Wamalo's post as Kibaki's number 2. That aside, it is not lost on many that the exit of Raila from KANU gave some muscle to hitherto KANU sycophants to quit the party.